You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and of sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of the imagination. There's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the narrow mind.
All right, all you narrow mind addicts, welcome back. We're glad that you've joined us on this 23rd day, the month of February 2007. We're glad that you could be with us tonight. Hallelujah, holler back. That's right. If you don't know what that means, I'm not going to tell you. That's for the younger people, okay? So we're just going to keep it between us, me and the young people, because I'm considered the younger people. I put myself in that category. All right, well, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. It is Open Phones Friday, so I don't have a lot of material planned. In fact, I've hardly got anything planned to talk about. So I need your participation. If you got a question, a comment, or you just like to introduce yourself. You know, we are broadcasting at a special time this week, 6 p.m. Our schedule has kind of been jumbled throughout the week. We did 6 o'clock on Monday, 6 o'clock on Tuesday, 9 a.m. on Wednesday, and then at 3 p.m. on Thursday, and now we're back at 6 o'clock. It's about 6:06 on the West Coast on Friday night. So maybe you haven't been able to listen live. Now's your chance to introduce yourself to me. It's, it doesn't have to be anything as far as a deep theological question or a challenge or anything like that. If you just want to call up and say hi, that's fine also. Our number, 1-800-466-1873. That is toll free. 800-466-1873. Or if you want to save us some money, you can call us on the local line at area code 951-676-0583. Now, you might be wondering why we're broadcasting at 6 p.m. Maybe you're a new listener. You just tuned in. You haven't been listening to the podcast, so you're kind of wondering, well, why is he broadcasting at 6 p.m.? We have a poll on the homepage, and we've asked for your participation. So on the upper right-hand side of the homepage there, you're going to see a survey. We would like you, and this includes all of our podcast listeners, we would like you to visit the website if you're listening to this via podcast. And I would like you to actually let me know what is your preference as far as time, as far as the time slot. Should we stick with 9 a.m.? Should we go to 3 p.m. in the afternoon on the West Coast? Or should we do the 6 p.m., which is actually 9 p.m. on the East Coast? Now, we have had a couple of listeners from Japan and Australia. One called me, the other one wrote me, said 6 p.m. is much better because they can listen. They can listen live. But remember, this program is for you guys. It's for our listeners. It's not just about me, although I got to tell you, I think I do prefer broadcasting at 9 o'clock in the morning just because my mind is a lot fresher. For example, today here I am running around, scurrying around, trying to get things done. Didn't get back until a few minutes after 5. Had to eat dinner, take a shower. And so there's a lot of things. My mind just seems to be a lot fresher. Not only that, but we've got things going on with the kids in the evening, and so my wife can't always be with me. She is here tonight, but we're postponing something that she has to do with my son until the program's over. But we're willing to sacrifice. And one of the reasons why we thought it would make a difference, or why we're even throwing this out, is because we do covet your phone calls. And but if there's no participation on the phone lines, then theoretically it wouldn't make a difference if we were broadcasting at 3 o'clock in the morning, because that means that you could always listen via podcast. So let me give out our phone number once again, 800-466-1873. That is toll free, 951-676-0583. Now, this morning I did a special interview. We haven't put it out on the podcast or on the blog page yet, but I had in studio Paul Minotta. Now, Paul Minotta is a good friend of mine. He's very sharp. He's very articulate. He knows a lot more about philosophy than I do. And he's the one that debated, you may recall, debated Dan Barker a while back and actually made Dan Barker look very silly. So he came by the studio today, excuse me, and we pre-recorded a show that's going to air on the Narrow Mind stream next Wednesday. That would be the 28th on the Atheistic Wednesday. We recorded a show that centered around the subject of the Rational Response Squad. And that's really what the topic was. And so it was a great show. I actually went back and listened to it again afterwards. I think you're really going to appreciate the show. So I'm going to put that out on Atheistic Wednesday. But in a push to get you to subscribe to the podcast, because remember, I've been harping on this for a while now. You got to subscribe to the podcast. That way, the shows will be delivered to you on a daily basis. They will be delivered to you within 30 minutes after the show. Well, as soon as I am able to upload them and we get the website updated with all the information concerning the show and all that, it gets delivered to your particular RSS catcher, whatever that may be, whether it's iTunes. I think iTunes is the best. I've been saying that for a while. So whatever it may be, you can catch the podcast there. So what I'm going to do is, this is what I'm going to do to promote subscriptions to our podcast. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to podcast in kind of a preview sort of fashion the interview that I had this morning with Paul Manata, so that the only people that will get it in advance are the podcast subscribers. It won't be available for download. It will just be available to the podcast subscribers. So, excuse me, go subscribe to the podcast, and then you will be able to listen to that program. You can expect to listen to it early, and I think that you will appreciate it. Paul Manata is a very sharp guy. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's go first out to Josh calling from Jackson, Mississippi. Josh, welcome to the Narrow Mind.
Hey, thanks for having me again on your show.
Now, since we've switched times, you've actually become a regular caller.
Yeah, on Tuesdays and Thursdays I have class. I'm a student at RTS, Reformed Theological Seminary in Jackson, Mississippi, so I'm not able to catch it on those days.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm still kind of fuming, I guess you could say, from that open theism debate. So that's what my call is going to be about. I guess, like I told you last time I called, I had 2 pages of notes of just things that I wanted to say, but I'll pick a couple of them and talk to you about them, and I can get your input on them and tell me what you think about them.
Okay.
The first one was, you brought up Genesis 50:20, which is a classic Reformed passage where Joseph is speaking to his brothers, and it says, Joseph says to his brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Right. And he's referring back to Joseph's brothers throwing him in a pit to be sold as a slave. Well, and the open theist response to that was, in your debate, yeah, God used it for good.
Right.
Now, if that's how we're to understand that, then that means that the brothers used it for evil. But that's not what the text says. The text says the brothers meant it for evil. So when Joseph's brothers were selling him into slavery, they had evil intentions. And at that point, God had the same intentions, but on a positive note, in a good note. So the same time the brothers were selling them into slavery, God was there working the same way the brothers were. It's the grammatical structure in the Hebrew is a parallel.
Well, wait a minute, Josh. I thought it said that what you meant for evil, God was able to turn around for good.
Oh, you're right. I must have mistranslated that, and all the English Bibles must have translated that wrong.
Yeah, that's the open theist translation.
Yeah, that's how they understand it.
Here's the open theist translation. What God didn't know you were going to mean for evil, he was able afterwards to bring about some good.
Yeah, to bring about some good out of it.
Right.
But I mean, the verse in the Hebrew structure of the verse, I just finished my third course of Hebrew, it's an exact parallel. What the brothers had at the moment of doing it, God had, but in the opposite. The brothers had evil, God had good intentions. So I just, to use that whole phrase, well, God used it for good, it's not what the verse says, and if you apply that to what the brothers did, it doesn't make any sense of the passage. So that's just a really bad argument to use against that passage.
And verse 19 also. You see verse 19? Joseph starts out by saying, do not be afraid, for am I in God's place? That was God's place. That was the place that God would have Joseph.
Yeah.
And that's totally disregarded. But in open theism, that's the place that the brothers would have Joseph.
Yeah.
It's totally backwards.
It is. And speaking of what's totally backwards, also another thing that he mentioned, and I love that you brought this up there in the debate. You asked him about how exactly do you pray for people is what you asked him.
Right.
And whenever I'm thinking of open theists or even Arminians, a quote comes to my mind from Charles Spurgeon, and I don't have the exact quote, but he said something to the effect of, the saints may not be the same in their belief about Calvinism, but on their knees, all believers are Calvinists.
Right.
And I think that the open theist guy, Bob Enyart, he proved that when you were talking to him, but in an indirect way, and I thought it was kind of funny how he did this, and I'll explain how he did that. You asked him, well, how do you pray for people? And he said, well, I don't pray for them. I pray that God would bring people into their lives.
Right.
But wait a minute, Bob. God can't bring people into people's lives.
You know what? I thought about that afterwards. I was thinking about that very same thing. That means that God is going to somehow have to influence people to come into their lives.
Yeah, but God can't do that. God can't mess with their free will. And in fact, before I was reformed in my understanding of soteriology, I noticed that inconsistency in my own prayer life, so I had to even stop praying that God would bring people into their lives. And I found it very, very difficult then to even pray for people's salvation. Right. And that's a personal testimony of mine on the road to becoming reformed. I noticed that inconsistency, but apparently Bob hasn't noticed that yet, that if God can't affect the will of the person you're praying for, then he can't affect the will of those that are going to come into the life of the person you're praying for.
Right. All you've done is move the problem back one step.
Exactly. And in his prayer, he has shown that he believes that God has the power to bring people into somebody's life, that God actually can take somebody and put them into somebody else's life, and that doesn't violate any of their, will or volition or anything. And we believe that. We believe it's not a violation of the will. They're not going to witness to them against their will.
That's right.
So I just thought that was very inconsistent of him to pray that way. But he probably hasn't given it a whole lot of thought in thinking out the implications of all that he's saying. So,
no, he hasn't. I've been working on a theme song for open theism.
Oh, gosh.
Would you like to hear it?
I would love to hear it.
Okay, here we go. This is how it goes. I haven't been able to write the words yet. So I've just got the music part down.
Now, isn't that from a TV show?
I don't know. It could be.
Okay.
It might be.
I think it's a TV show on MTV.
Oh, really? Wow, what a coincidence.
Yeah, and the name of the TV show has an explicit in it, so I'm not going to say it on your radio program, but it's what you call a donkey.
Oh, is it a biblical term?
The Bible talks about it, yes.
Okay, good. Then, well, from the open theist, they really can't fault me because they can't cry out to God, why is Gene Cook doing this? Because, after all, God didn't know that I was going to do that, right?
And God can't do anything about it.
No, he can't.
Yeah.
All right, Josh, good talking to you again, man.
All right, thank you very much.
Keep plugging away at Hebrew, and be sure and tell you and your buddy Andrew there to spread the word about narrow mind and the addiction.
All right. I got a pastor friend of mine from Orange, California, to subscribe to your podcast last I think it was on Monday. So he's a Reformed Baptist pastor in Orange, California. So maybe he's even listening right now. So give a shout out to my pastor friend there.
What's his
name?
John
Cochran.
John. All right. Now you're going to have to mention. Now you can send him an email saying you got to listen to Friday's edition because we mentioned you by name, John Cochran, Pastor John.
All right. Thanks
Okay,
for having
Josh.
me on.
All right. We'll talk to you. All right, let's go out to Jackson, or not Jackson. We just came from Jackson. Let's go out to Montebello, California, and talk to Jesse. What's going on, Jesse?
Hey, Pastor Gene, how you doing?
Good. Long time no talk.
Yeah, how's everything?
Everything's going very well.
Good.
Did you like my little song?
That was hilarious. Yeah.
I think I got it from a movie somewhere, but I can't remember the name of the movie.
I can't. You know what? It's on the tip of my tongue.
All right. Well, if you remember, if anybody out there knows the name of the song or the movie, excuse me, I'm still recovering from this flu. Maybe you could send me an email or let us know.
Yeah,
or let my screener know. That'd be even better.
Yeah, very, very, very catchy tune. Very catchy.
All right. So what's going on?
Well, you know what? In the years that I've been listening to your program, it's amazing how much I've learned and how much I've studied.
Praise God.
Yeah, very much so. It's coming from the church that where I was, and listening to, especially I started listening because of the Apologetics, and I was using some of that and learning more and reading more about that, and using that with, I was in the youth group at my church, and helping out with the kids in that way and giving lessons on that. But especially recently with the covenant theology, with Scott Hill and
Jason Robertson.
Jason Robertson, right? That's just been amazing. In fact, I just came home from work and Redemption Accomplished and Applied and Signs and Wonders just showed up on my doorstep. So.
Oh wow, great!
Yeah.
You'll be able to follow along with us because we're actually going through the book. We're actually citing the page numbers as we quote John Murray.
Right.
Now you're talking about the other book is Jay Adams?
Yes.
All right. That's a good one too. In fact, I just loaned that book yesterday on after we finished recording Covenant Theology Thursday. I loaned that book to Scott Hill. I said, you need to read this. Now, I don't agree. Let me point something out there. I think Jay Adams has an interesting interpretation of Revelation 20. Jay Adams is amillennial, and I'm amillennial, but right. I don't agree necessarily with some of the things that Jay Adams says. But that's the only thing that I really don't agree with in that book. He doesn't take a standard or a classical dispensation, a classical amillennial interpretation of Revelation 20. So watch that and see if you can catch what I'm talking about.
Okay. Yeah, definitely.
But other than that,
before listening to your program, I had no idea what dispensationalism was. I had no idea what amillennialism was, or Calvinism.
Right.
And
but you were a dispensationalist, I would imagine.
Yes, I was.
And you were also probably an Arminian.
Yes. And then I started reading up on it, and I was like, wow, man, this guy's mean.
You said I was mean, or?
Yeah. I don't like what he's saying, but...
Well, that's great. That was my very same response the first time I heard Reformed theology being taught on the radio.
Right.
I got upset with those guys. I called them up. And they cut me off, and I was bummed out. It was the White Horse Inn. Have you ever heard of the White Horse Inn?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, the White Horse Inn was my first introduction to Calvinism. They were talking about Romans chapter 3 verses 10 and 11, how nobody seeks after God.
Right.
And I was driving. I remember I took a trip to Jack in the Box, and I'm sitting in my car listening to this. This is probably back in 1992 or 93, and I'm listening to these guys, and I just got upset. I said, wait a minute, I know it says nobody seeks after God, but I see people seeking after God every Sunday morning when the pastor gives an altar call. Right. So these guys must be wrong. And then I kept listening, and it was just so clear and so biblical. Finally, after about 6 months of fighting with it, I had to surrender.
Right.
And now,
it didn't take me quite as long.
Well, the Lord was more gracious to you, I suppose. Yeah. Or maybe you were just more spiritual than me. I don't know.
No, I just, it was just a matter of me picking up the Bible and trying to, refute what it is you were, or what Calvinism teaches, or, the doctrines of grace. And I couldn't. It was clearly written out for me.
That's good. Yeah, Romans chapter 9 is pretty clear.
Yeah.
And John chapter 6. Usually if somebody's struggling with Calvinism, I direct them to one of those two chapters, and you really can't argue against it unless you just have a preconditioned mindset and an agenda that you're not going to accept it no matter what you read in Scripture.
Right.
And that's nothing more than the sinful nature of man.
Yeah, and I experienced that at my old church, so I saw that quite a bit.
I've seen it before too.
So, to the point where now I went back a few weeks ago, and I received a few raised eyebrows from some of the people there. So
now, what do you mind if I ask what church you're going to now? I think you told me.
No, I haven't found a home church yet. I've been listening to a lot of stuff online and I'm thinking of making a trip down to Dr. Maury's church.
Okay.
About a 40-minute drive from where I live.
Okay, I don't know exactly where Montebello is.
Just east of East LA.
Okay, just east of East. Is it anywhere near the 91 freeway?
The 91, I would say it's probably, well, depending on what city would that be off the 91?
Well, I was thinking, you got Corona over there, and then you've got Anaheim.
Anaheim would be closer than Corona for me.
All right. Yeah, I might be able to direct you to some churches in that area. I'll have to give it some thought.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So are you Mexican?
I am.
Okay. I didn't know that. Because I think on your when we used to have up the forums, if I remember correctly, didn't it say fat skateboarder or something like that?
Skateboarder, yeah.
Okay. So you don't think, when you think of a skateboard, you think of some white kids cruising around on a skateboard. So, but I can kind of hear it in your voice. And then when you said east of East LA, I'm like, okay, I kind of am putting the pieces together now.
Right. Yeah. No, I skated when I was a kid, and left it for a while. Then a few years back, I started skateboarding again. So.
Okay, great. I just got an email the other day. Some guy wrote me and told me that he was listening to The Narrow Mind with his cholos in Riverside. So I wrote him back and I said, well, let's hook up. I can drive up that direction. You guys can drive down. So
yeah, no, we got your back up here, man.
What's that?
We got your back up here.
Okay, good. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that reminds me of something about Mark from Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
When you were the first time he called in, he was talking about, or you brought up, I think it was Leroy in Compton.
Yeah.
Putting a gun to his face and he would take it out of his hands and.
Yeah, and I told him he'd never been to Compton.
Yeah, you know what, Mark, if you're listening, if you fly out to Los Angeles, I personally will pick you up at LAX, and I will drive you to Nickerson Gardens, and I will wait for you on the other side. And if you come out with, alive, first of all, and with clean shorts.
Yeah, Mark doesn't get out to California too much. I think he may be living kind of a what's the word? An isolated existence there, sheltered existence in Ohio.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, I've never been out to Ohio, so it might be a pretty rough part of the hood. Who knows? But I have preached in Compton before. In fact, a good friend of mine, Ken Jones, is the pastor of Greater Union Baptist Church in Compton, and that's the home of what's the name of that record label? Death Row Records, the rap label.
Sure.
So that's a pretty tough neck of the woods.
Yeah.
All right, Jesse, it's been good talking to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gene.
All right, are you subscribed to the podcast?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, good. Well, look for tomorrow. I'll send out that interview with Paul Minotti. You guys will enjoy it.
Cool.
All right, take care.
You too.
All right, let me give out our phone number once again, 1-800-466-1873. That is toll free, 1-800-466-1873. You know what I'm going to do now? I'm going to play a clip. This is like an 8-minute clip. Now, I mentioned that we talked, Paul Minotti and I talked about Brian Sapien of the Rational Response Squad. They have a website called Rational Responders. You may recall I talked about them in the past. We kind of made fun of their blasphemy challenge. Number one, that they don't know what blasphemy actually means. That's number one. And number two, they're targeting the youth. And in fact, it came out on the Nightline interview that they've advertised I don't know if it was the blasphemy challenge or the Rational Response website on Tiger Beat. Tiger Beat of all places. That's the magazine that's made for kids, right? The one with Leif Garrett on the cover? Sean Cassidy? No? Danny Bonaducci? Am I getting close? All right, so check this out. Laura Ingraham is a news reporter. I've heard her before on, I forget what the radio station is. There's an AM radio station. I think it's 760 AM in Los Angeles. It's a talk radio station. And so she's like an anchor person for this. But apparently she's been on TV or whatever. So she's doing a little interview here with Brian Sapien. Now, I found out during the course of listening to this 8-minute clip that Lori Ingram actually is a Roman Catholic, so obviously I don't believe with all of her views, but let me tell you something. She shreds Brian. She makes Brian Sapien look stupid. Okay, listen to this.
You were interested in phoning in when we invited Brian Sapien on the show. He's the co-founder of the atheist website known as RationalResponders.com, and he has started something known as the, okay, now write this down, the Blasphemy Challenge, which encourages atheists to come forward and deny the existence of God on YouTube. So you can go to YouTube and deny the existence of God and be very smart, apparently. In exchange for their blasphemy, participants will be given a DVD. That's pretty good. Joining us now, Brian Sapien. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Laura. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you on, and I'm trying to figure this all out, but I'm going to read from your bio. I guess this is from RationalResponders.com. Is this from the website? Yeah. Okay, it says you're a full-time activist, but you're not employed. You're sustaining yourself fully on any income generated helping people overcome theism and related projects. Can you really make a living at that, Brian?
No, not if I didn't have loving family members that supported the cause and took care of most of the expenses. So, no, you can't make a living doing it. Not yet, at least.
So what you're trying to do here is get people to put their souls on the line. Because, well, or you don't believe in a soul. So you're just to put it all on the line. What are you putting on the line, by the way, if you don't believe in a soul?
Well, I think that you're showing people that you're not scared of what we are led to believe we should be scared of. And obviously we are a predominantly Christian society, and so most people are scared of Yahweh's hell, and we're showing people that we're not, and we're so unscared that we would commit ourselves to a hell that obviously we don't believe exists.
What do you think informs your value system? Where does it come from?
Reason and logical thought, and
But where did that come from?
Your brain.
But where did that come from?
Well, it's a biological process and evolution, and would you propose that it came from a god somehow?
Well, I don't propose that I'm sort of smarter than anyone who's ever lived, and certainly don't think I'm the smartest person living now. But yeah, I do believe that there are things that we probably can't explain that inform who we are. And when I got to tell you, there's simple things for me. When I look at an infant, when I see a mother holding a child, when I witness, the humanity and the compassion of people, a loving family like the one that supports you, I can't help but think that love, that enduring love, comes from something. It doesn't come from reason. It comes from something in someone. And yes, of course, I believe it comes from God. But you think love comes from evolution?
Well, actually, I think love does come from reason. I think that, if you put a bunch of people in a cave from birth and they relied on each other to get by, 30 years from now, you'd see that, they all managed to realize on their own, without any holy text, without anybody guiding them, that they were dependent on each other and they needed each other to get by. And we kind of have that moral code with each other that existed well before God belief, or we wouldn't have gotten to the point where we could even, come up with texts that show people that, we believe in some sort of God. So I think moral codes come well before religion does. And I don't think that we need religion to be good people. Atheists would be, locked
right.
up.
But morality, however, and we'll get into this more deeply, but morality consists of a set of commands. Morality are commands of behavior, and commands of behavior don't come out of a cave. They don't come out of situations. They come out of something deeper and greater than that. How do you propose that? Why shouldn't it be every man for himself? I mean, why shouldn't it be, the survival of the fittest period? Why should we help someone? Why should we have good Samaritans? Why should we ever have had a Mother Teresa? Why should we have Christian missionaries right now working in Africa where the UN won't go? Why is that happening? and
some
not
degree,
just
I
total
think it
chaos.
is every man for himself, but inherent in that is the understanding that you need other people in order to look out for yourself.
No, the
you wouldn't go
missionary
around-
doesn't need other. No. You're not going to get away with that on this show. The missionary or the volunteer, the Peace Corps volunteer working in Africa doesn't need to be there. They're there for a reason. They're there for something greater than themselves. So that completely turns your point on its head. That it's just this is how it would work out in a cave. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, you don't want to bring up missionaries in Africa to me. I mean, that's a sore subject. I mean, they're actually, doing a horrible injustice to those people there, and they're spreading AIDS worse than had they come in there and taught, how to use a condom and this.
What do you think would have happened? Right, but what do you think would have happened if all of us, and I say all of us, had listened to God's commands more faithfully? Do you think we would have had more AIDS?
We would have all killed each other off by now.
If we listened to God's commandments, love your neighbor as you love yourself, we would have killed more people. I don't get that.
Well, do you remember God murdering everybody on earth? In the Bible, Jesus lied. He worked on the Sabbath day. He broke commandments. He encouraged stealing. God condones and orders adultery in the Bible. He murdered over.
What Bible are you reading, by the way? God also sat down with people who weren't believers. God believed that everybody could be redeemed, and Jesus believed that, and that's why He's a loving God. Because and I don't know if you don't read the New Testament or you don't know the New Testament. A lot of people want to ask you questions. So let's go to Bob in San Diego, KCBQ. Bob.
Brian, if we could put a quantity on all knowledge and information, what percentage do you think even the smartest man would have of that? Let me just say maybe 2 or 3%, which may be generous. That being the case, how does your reasoned brain even accept the fact that you could even know if there is a God or not, and not knowing if there is one or not is actually the definition of an agnostic?
Well, I am an agnostic as well as being atheist. An atheist is somebody who lacks belief in a God, and that's what I am. I also don't know for sure if a God exists, and I don't claim to know if a first cause is known, so I'm agnostic as well.
I never knew you could be both, I guess. Well, that's something that doesn't... To me, that doesn't make sense. An atheist does not believe in the existence of God, but then you said you don't know if God exists, and you did this whole website to convince people to come forward and say God doesn't exist. So which is it?
Well, I think you're living in a Christian-dominated world there. There's more than one God. I'm fairly certain that the Christian God doesn't exist, but it is possible that some sort of alien God or some God that I don't know about does exist.
Okay. Let's go to Michael in Indianapolis. Michael, line 6. You're talking to Brian Sapien.
Yes, why do you say we evolved when all the evidence for evolution has been lies or been proven wrong?
Well, I mean, that's simply, Christian propaganda. I implore you to do your own research and find out for yourself, and don't believe what you've been told by the church.
All right, we're going to go ahead and go back to the phones now. That's the first part of the clip between Laura Ingraham and Brian Sapien. So I'm going to go ahead and take some calls because we've got some long-distance calls here. And I'm not sure. My wife said that we've got Rich calling from Okinawa, Japan, and I'm not sure where that clip is of Rich. Rich, welcome to the Narrow Mind.
Hey, how you doing, Gene?
Good. I wanted to play that clip for those of our listeners that may not recognize your name. This is the Marine calling from Okinawa, Japan, that asked the question, "What is your major malfunction?" So. I was looking around for the clip. I couldn't find it because I've got it programmed into one of our commercial breaks. But
I actually called for two things. One was I've been really, for a long time, that discomforter guy has really been troubling me with the strength of his arguments, and I think I came up with a few to refute him.
Okay.
First of all, I actually bounce these off of Paul Manata, so. First of all, if I saw him, I'd probably just take him in my bicep and pop his head like a pimple. I think that would probably solve the problem. The second thing is that, I would point out to him that there's people like, have you ever heard of the Power Team? They bend steel bars with their arms.
Right.
And they rip phone books in half.
Right. I've seen them.
Well, they believe in God, so there you have it.
You stupid fundy.
And, Kurt Warner, remember at the Super Bowl?
Uh-huh.
Remember that he thanked Jesus?
Right.
There you go.
So that's evidence against the discomforter's arguments.
Exactly. He's totally, there's nothing he can answer to that. So,
well, he wants to come back.
I just wanted to give some apologetic tools to some people out there.
I appreciate that. He wants to come back on the program because when he heard about the Rational Response Squad's Blasphemy Challenge, he came up with one of his own challenges. I don't know if you've heard about it, but his latest challenge, he's getting the video together now, is called the Add Circumcision to the Gospel Challenge. And so he's calling upon young men everywhere, not women, of course, but young men everywhere, to add to the gospel by being circumcised, and then after it's done, say, "I'm not afraid." So it'll be interesting once that gets up on YouTube. He's actually making a video.
He cracks me up.
He told me that. So.
Yeah. Hey,
because
by
I
the
got
way,
funk in my shoe.
One of the, I did want to thank you for changing the format to allow folks from the Far East and Australia to call in. The way I looked at it, too, the people who had time to call you in the middle of the day probably didn't have real jobs anyway, so that's probably why you're getting calls from the shiftless. Not all of them were shiftless, but
right.
The atheists who didn't really have anything else to do. Anyway, after I'm done insulting all those people, hey, I did want to make a quick comment on the open theism debate that you had.
Okay.
A few things that really bothered me was it always ceases to amaze me how people come up, first of all, accusing you of Greek philosophy, and then he comes up with a list of fixed attributes of God that I can't really find in the scriptures. Of course, he leaves out holiness, which God underlines by calling himself that 3 times and emphasizing it so much in scripture that it's inescapable.
Right.
But, I guess holiness just didn't make his list for some reason, even though God repeatedly says he's holy. Even if I reject all those other texts and I accept his worldview and say, well, okay, these are, let's use his argument for a second. He says these are his attributes that don't change, loving and that sort of thing. Well, so what are you saying? Are you fixed in some sort of Greek philosophical worldview now that God is so fixed that he can't change from being loving? Gee, mankind has no problem being unloving and loving. Are you saying that God doesn't have this capability, that God lacks the ability to not be nice, to not be kind? It just, the same argumentation works for him, but it's a sentimental view, and it's really frustrating having to listen to that. It just shows the darkness of man's heart to be able to try and create some sort of thing like that, and he should be ashamed of himself for calling himself a minister of the gospel.
I agree, and we've gotten more calls in reference to that discussion, that debate that took place, I think, than any other topic in the history of this program. Every night that we've opened up the phones, we've gotten calls on that. And I think that he would say, yes, God does have the capacity to set aside love and become a hateful God, a vengeful God.
Well, why doesn't he? Why can't he? I mean, if he can set aside his holiness, if he can set aside his justice and all sorts of other things, maybe when he wrote those books that he's reading and he's still actually gleaning some information from, he's reading these 2,000-year-old texts. Well, maybe God back then did consider loving or to be kind to people to be the most important thing. But, now 2,000 years later, the Holocaust has happened. He's probably getting a little tired. Who's to say that anything in God's Word, he hasn't gotten a little bit wiser now and just a little bit tired, regrets having written the New Testament at all? Gosh, look at this guy. He actually thinks I'm loving now still. I mean, I gave up on that years ago. He has no basis to believe any fixed principle in Scripture once he changes the idea that God has to be true to his Word.
I agree. In fact, he even said that God would not lock himself into a particular plan. And so that can work against him, as you just mentioned, because if God has promised to be loving, then in a sense, God has locked himself in to the characteristic or the attribute of being a loving God.
Right. I mean, I don't know which book I don't actually know which verses God just hasn't, changed his mind over if I adopt this worldview. We might as well just say, well, none of these writings are useful. They're way too old to be current. So, we just need God to constantly give us an idea on what mood are you in today, God, so I can I can know how to worship you.
That's a good point. Rich,
Anyway, hey, thanks for your time.
Good talking to you, brother. Take care. I look forward to meeting you one of these days. When you get down to San Diego again, please give me a call, shoot me an email or something so we can hook up for lunch.
Hey, yeah, and if you're ever in Okinawa, please come by.
I'd love to. I'd love to meet the troops. Go out there and preach to them.
It is nice out here. It's
All right.
beautiful weather. It's like San Diego.
Good.
We'll see you later.
Okay, we'll talk to you later. All right, let's go out to Adam calling from Cedarburg. Where is Cedarburg? I can't see the state.
Cedarburg, Wisconsin. It's just north of Milwaukee.
Okay, great. Cedarburg, Wisconsin. Adam, welcome to Narrow Mind.
Thank you. I wanted to, first of all, just make a quick comment about the open theism program. I don't know anything about open theism, but from hearing your debate, that stuff isn't even Christian.
I agree.
That stuff isn't even Christian. I mean, it's just baloney. Anyways, I wanted to commend you on your dialogue with the homosexual this Monday. In fact, it was funny. I am a student of theological languages at a Lutheran school up here, and so I had studied one of the passages in Leviticus. And if anyone needs confirmation of this, I posted a message before the program on your blog.
Oh, okay.
And then you pretty much saw the same things in his argument that I did. And I thought it was hilarious how we both saw that this exegesis was just at times just laughable.
Yeah, it was.
I mean, when you take a text like, well, for instance, I have my Hebrew Bible with me, and I have it opened up to Exodus 20. His main argument against Leviticus is, look, this is addressed to the Jewish people entering the land of Canaan, and therefore it can't apply to anyone else. Well, the problem is, and I don't think anyone would disagree that the Ten Commandments apply, and yet we have in Genesis or in Exodus 20, and the Lord God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God, which brought you from the land of Egypt. Who is he talking to here? He's talking to the Jews.
That's right.
Before he gives them the Ten Commandments. So it seemed like, I wish I could have called, because I wanted to ask him, if you believe the Ten Commandments still apply, but here the context specifically says it's talking to Jews. Why don't you apply the same standards to Leviticus that you apply here?
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure if he would agree that the Ten Commandments are still applicable to a Christian life.
Well,
because
he would be in a vast minority. If that's the case.
He was. You remember he was saying that we are not under law, we are under grace, and I had to kind of explain to him what that meant?
Yeah.
I think that he was under the impression that those commandments are no longer binding on us as Christians.
Oh, this is one of the things that I mentioned, again, I didn't get a chance to ask him. But what does he do with the fact that Jesus quotes the second greatest commandment in a chapter that is sandwiched between the two, Leviticus 19?
Yeah, that's a problem for him, isn't it?
I mean, because the second greatest commandment comes right in the text he wants to say is a purity code.
Right.
But if it's in the New Testament, Jesus says this is the second greatest commandment. What's it doing in the book of Leviticus?
Good question.
I mean, as I said, I tried to ask him, but I'm reading these texts, I've read commentators on that, and even liberal scholars agree that text condemns homosexuality, not just pagan homosexual practices.
Right.
Even liberal scholars, when it's not, they're willing to say it doesn't apply today, it's just this purity code, like eating shellfish and so forth. But I was just shocked that this stuff was using it. But I think you did a very good job. It was funny when you asked him, what was it? Are you saying we can let our children pass through fire as long as we don't do it and worship the Moloch? You could hear a pin drop for about 20 seconds.
Yeah, he did get a little quiet there. I don't think anybody's ever asked him that before.
Well, it's a problem, and really, in reality, in my school, if you presented that type of exegesis, you would definitely fail.
Yeah.
That is just unacceptable. But if you're going to have him back again, those would be some good questions to ask him. And
well, we'll try to give everybody plenty of notice because I'd like to include our listening audience next time, so it's not just me, just my opinion against his, so he can actually. Right. Well, one thing that you might take an interest in, there's a blog, Fido. I happen to be one of the contributors, although I don't contribute as often as I'd like to.
Okay.
They posted the dialogue there, the audio, and he's actually been posting quite a bit on there. And so there's been a lot of interaction with him. There's been a wonderful article written by Gene Bridges, who's from North Carolina, refuting his position. And it's worthy of checking out. That's Fido. There's actually a link to it on our homepage. If you go down on the lower left-hand side, you'll see the link to the Fido blog.
Okay.
All right, Adam. Good talking to you. Let those other students know at school about the narrow mind. I'd appreciate it, all right?
All right, thanks.
All right, let's go to Kirkland, Washington, and talk to Scott. Scott, welcome to the narrow mind.
Hey, Gene, good to talk to you again.
Good to talk to you, brother.
Hey, I've been inspired, first of all, by your other callers and giving their shout-outs to the people that they've helped get to be narrow-mind addicts. So I'd like to do that real quick if I could.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. My buddy, Gary Burns, he's up here in Kirkland with me. He is now officially addicted. He called me up the other day and told me. So I keep telling him he needs to call in, so hopefully maybe this will motivate him to do it.
Good, yeah. Mention that we said his name on the show, and he'll probably listen to it. So
I will. I'm sure he'll call me up and say, "Hey, I heard that," before I even get a chance to. So
cool. So
anyway,
you had a comment about the clip, the clip with Brian Sapien.
I did, yeah. It just really reminds me of how much you just hear the same old, tired things over and over again. I'm sure you've heard of Sam Harris, right?
Yes.
Okay, so on my blog, I've been kind of going after Sam Harris recently, and it was amazing how I don't think these guys know each other, Brian and Sam, but how they use almost the exact same argumentation. And the thing that I wanted to point out was just, you've talked about it, and obviously I'm a big proponent of presuppositional apologetics.
Mm-hmm.
And just how much different the conversation would have looked like between, say, you and Brian versus Laura, who, asked some tough questions, but I think in the end...
It gets tougher. I'm going to play the second, just if I can butt in here, Scott. I'm going to play the second part of that clip, or that interview. She gets much tougher on him, and it gets actually kind of painful for him. But still, your point is well taken. She's coming from a more traditional Christian, well, not even, I don't know if it's Christian, a more traditional Roman Catholic defense of the faith. And so it's not going to be specifically based on Scripture. It's not going to be presuppositional in nature. So I agree with you totally. It would be a totally different conversation. That's why Brian Sapien is afraid to come on this program, and he's afraid to debate Paul Manata.
Oh, yeah. Well, and just think about it. I mean, we would address, as presuppositionalists, we would address morality. But instead of sitting there saying, well, what Bible are you reading, Brian, where she attempts to, I don't know, in some way say that God didn't kill everyone on the planet, because he did.
Yeah.
I mean, the presupposition
Noah's flood.
What's that?
Noah's flood.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Noah's flood, except for, the Noah and his family who God graciously saved. But the question for Brian, just like in my blog where I post the question to Sam, is what's the problem? By what standard are we to judge? So, God is a being, and, if we're going to critique him for something that he allegedly did, we ought to at least give him his existence.
Right.
So he has an opinion, he has some thoughts, and it seemed good to him, and according to his societal standard, according to his personal standard, to kill everyone. Why are they complaining? It doesn't make sense in an atheist worldview why they would be upset.
No, it doesn't, does it?
No, because God, well, first of all, I can't have it both ways, right? I mean, either God exists, in which case he has some rights in order to determine for himself what morality is, just as humankind has determined for ourselves what morality is, or he doesn't exist, in which case the whole idea of even discussing that he killed everyone is nonsensical, because that's like saying Santa Claus, sorry kids, I didn't mean to do that about Santa, but something fictitious like Santa Claus just, went crazy and shot a bunch of people at the mall. Well, no, we wouldn't even argue that because there is no Santa Claus.
Right. Now, what Brian would say, I'm sure, as well as any other atheist that's on his feet, would say, well, we're doing an internal critique of your Christian worldview, but here's the problem with that type of response. When you do an internal critique, you have to take the whole worldview. You have to take the worldview as a whole. Our worldview starts out with God being God. He's the one that gives life. In our worldview, man rebels. Man commits cosmic treason, as R.C. Sproul says. God has the right to execute judgment, and do whatever he wants because he's God. Now, if you want to critique our worldview, but include the whole worldview. Don't just pull parts out.
Oh, exactly. It's like, sure, I think Greg Bonson brings this up in his debate with Eddie Tabash, because Eddie Tabash makes the same point. He tries to make God look to be a real meanie. But if you take all of God's word, not just the part about flooding the earth and killing everyone, but the part about the beginning that he makes man rebels, with the knowledge that in the day that he rebels, he will surely die, and this brings about the sentence of death on him and all who would come after him, then it makes sense logically. There's no logical problem at that point. It just comes down to the fact that for an atheist, morality equals popularity.
Yep.
And in his worldview, he doesn't like the fact that God flooded the world and killed everyone except for Noah and his family. Therefore, he wants to put God in the seat of the one to be judged, and he wants to judge God.
That's right. At the end of the day, that's all it's about.
Yep, and it comes down to you could have 100 different atheists, and at the end of the day, if you just press them, you get to the exact same place with all of them, because that's fundamentally what it is.
Yeah. Brian Sapien, if you're out there listening, Scott from Kirkland, Washington's got a message for you.
Dude, listen. I win 1-0. Just wanted to say it.
That was Jack Black for your information. All right, Scott, good talking to you, man.
All right, thanks, Gene.
Take care. All right.
Bye-bye.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and play the second half of this interview, which is really the part where she begins to hold his feet to the fire. It's pretty funny. Here you go.
Michael?
And everything they use to prove evolution has been proven to be wrong or a lie. I mean, what is your...
Well,
do you have any evidence on evolution, or why do you believe evolution?
Of course, we have a lot of that on our website, and I would suggest if you have some peer-reviewed publications or some scientific experts that have shown that evolution is false, bring it to our website. It's rationalresponders.com, and we engage people in conversation about these issues all the time.
Hey, Brian, have you ever thought of just getting a job?
I had a job for a long time. I've never been more happy in my life than I am right now.
Well, I would be happy if I didn't have to work and Mommy and Daddy could pay for me, too, but that's not what I actually have to work for a living, as do a lot of other people. And I'm just wondering, at some point, I mean, do you ever ask yourself, why are you so committed to I guess, in some way, poo-pooing what other people believe? And why is it such an obsession? I mean, I know that atheists are out there and agnostics, and, that's just the way the world is, and I can, try to talk to them and say this is what I believe, and maybe it'll change some minds, but I don't stay up at night thinking that there are all these people out there who, are agnostics and atheists, but it seems like you are up at night worrying about all these crazy Christians.
Right. Well, I think it's a little unfair what you just did, by the way. I work about 100 to 140 hours a week. And additionally, my mom and dad don't pay for me. I have a very loving girlfriend who very much believes in what I'm doing. And what we do believe in is that religious faith is dangerous, and that it is changing the scope of the world. And, it's something that we need to help rid the planet of. Faith is not something that we use. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. So I was just going to say, would you have the Catholic charities across the globe disband, leave their posts, leave the AIDS orphanages that no one will go into, and I mean no one, leave the war-torn parts of the world where no one will go except the people who believe in something greater than themselves and greater than perhaps a website? Would you have them leave?
There are atheists that go to these, places. They just don't do it in the name of atheism when they go, so it's not as, well known. They don't create.
Do you actually, Brian, are you actually going to try to tell me that the majority of the charity work done in the world is done by atheists? Are you kidding me?
Well, the majority of the world is Christian. It would just come to reason that if all things were fair, that 80% of the world, that believes in a God, that 80% of the world would be people. Who do you
think Martin Luther King was? How about the women's suffrage movement? How about every freedom movement in the world had a religious component to it? If the atheists had their way, there wouldn't have been any of that. Gandhi, yeah, he was a real threat to the world, too. Or maybe he was, according to your website. I don't know.
No, actually, Gandhi wasn't that bad of a person. But, what's funny is that Gandhi's in hell if the Bible is true.
Well, first of all, you need to learn more about the Catholic faith because it's
I grew up as Catholic.
Oh, no, don't tell me that. My head hurts. You grew up as a Catholic? Oh, no.
Sure.
All right. My head hurts. I'm hurting. All right, hold on. We're going to get to some more questions. Stay with us.
All right, that's it. Classic, is it not? Why don't you get a job, she says to him. Yeah, Laura Ingraham says, yeah, I'd be happy if I didn't have to work either. That's not fair. I spent 140 hours this week answering emails from 13-year-old girls that wrote me from our link that we had on the Tiger Beat website. Brian, dude, she got you on that one. You lay awake at night thinking about Christians. You're obsessed with Christians. Most of the material on your website isn't an argument against theism. It's an argument against Christianity. I love the part where Laura Ingraham says, if I had my mom and dad to take care of me. And he says, I have a very loving girlfriend. So your girlfriend supports you financially. Your girlfriend pays for your internet connection. Your girlfriend pays for your cell phone bill. I see, Brian. It's all coming together now. All right, we're going to leave Brian alone so that he can think about how he's going to pull down the evil influence of the Christian empire in this world as he goes to sleep tonight. I want to remind our listeners also, if you'd like to leave a voicemail for us, you can do that. We've now got it hooked up again to the 800 number. We've got it hooked up to the 800 number. So if you leave a voicemail, what you need to do is, now this is only for addicts. If you're not an addict, don't bother. But if you are an addict, and if you're wondering, Gene, what's an addict? Then that excludes you. You're not an addict. If you have to ask, it doesn't apply to you. But you can call in on the 1-800 number. You can leave a voicemail. Be sure and state your name, your city. Leave a pithy message there for us. Let me just give you an example of what I'm talking about so that you know if you should decide to do this. What will happen is I will usually, if it's a clever message, I will actually put it to music. I think I've got one here. Let me see. There's one called Sparky. Let me pull that one up for you. Here we go. This is an example. Now, this person called, left this message. I liked it. It's a little bit different. And then I actually put it to music. So here you go.
I'm Sparky, and I'm an example of life rising from non-life that Mark is looking for, and I turn into the narrow mind from a parallel dimension via fiber optic cable. I'm Sparky.
Let's go out to Asheville, North Carolina. We got a weird echo. Hold on a second. Let's try that again. Let's go out to, I'm not sure what's going on, but can you hear an echo over there, Grace? Devin, are you with us? All right. You don't happen to have your speakers turned up or anything?
No, I just turned them off, actually.
Okay. Oh, we're not doing a computer phone, are we?
No,
Okay. Yeah, there's I can hear my voice echoing in the background there.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and let you talk because you sound fine.
Okay.
What's on your mind?
Oh, I just wanted to say I was apparently the Irrational Response Club just had a couple of Christians on their show tonight.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, I was listening to it. The guys weren't so bad. I mean, they're doing the whole evidentialism thing. Mm-hmm. But I decided to hop into their little chat room, and I just started tossing out some verses, pretty much slamming what old Rook was talking about. And, I was just kicked out really quick. So
they kicked you out?
Yeah, just booted right out. They were like, they actually said, I think Sapien said, well, you might as well quote Gene Cook, Devin.
Funny.
So, yeah, it was pretty funny stuff.
Yeah, he's not going to want to mention the word Gene Cook when he hears this interview that I did today of Paul Minotta. So I don't know if you caught the first part of the show here, Devin, and I'll say it again for those listeners that tuned in late. But if you go over and subscribe to the podcast, I'm gonna publish a special podcast tomorrow that will only be available for our podcast subscribers. It's an interview that took place this morning with Paul Minotta here at the studio at the Narrow Mind, and it was a great interview. And we talked about Brian Sapien and the Rational Response Club, or squad, or whatever it is they're calling themselves. So be sure and subscribe to that. All right, we're out of time. Devin, thanks for calling. And by the way, on that podcast, we played the rap song at the very end. We played the new rap song that you sent us. So be sure and tell. I'm trying to remember what the guy's name was. The latest rap song that you sent us. What was the artist?
That's from Flava.
Flava.
Yeah, Flava of Lost Soul Productions.
All right, yeah, you can let them know that we played it. So if you subscribe to the podcast, you guys will be getting that tomorrow in your podcast subscription catcher. Until Monday, we'll be back Monday at 6 p.m. So we'll see you then. May the Lord bless the study of His Word.